Nkosazana, Dlamini-Zuma or Naledi Pandor. Could one of them be the country's next deputy president? Calls have been mounting for President-elect Cyril Ramaphosa to appoint a woman as his second in command. If he does, will it be a move to deal with factionalism in the ANC or a giant leap to promote gender equality? To talk about this, we have Ranjeni Munusamy, Associate Editor of TISO Black Star, and Professor Ansha Schumann from the Department of Politics at Wits University, joining me in the Johannesburg studio. Good to have both of you with us. What do you think is going to drive this choice here? I suspect it's all about politics.
It's obviously about politics, Jane. I think that President Ramaphosa rather is facing a fight-back campaign within the ANC, and I think that the biggest stumbling block to his agenda going forward is the politics of the ANC. So I think he's going to try and maneuver strategically and use this gap that's been presented by David Mabuza not making himself available right now to maneuver strategically. So it makes absolute sense to appoint Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma as deputy president for now. You must know that somebody like Naledi Pandor was his choice for deputy president pre-Nasrec. So if he had to choose someone like her, it would look as if it's a factional move. Whereas if he chooses somebody from the opposition faction in the ANC, he's able to neutralize that faction to some extent. So although the issue of gender equality has been elevated on the ANC agenda, I think that this maneuver would be more driven by politics rather than the gender question.
It seems to be the case, doesn't it? I mean, it might just be a bonus having a woman in there, but I'm not sure it'll help us not much. What do you think?
Well, I think the question generally is what do we expect if we have a particular group being represented in politics, right? And of course we assume in a representative democracy all groups should be represented in one way or another. But we know from research, and well, you might hear I'm coming from Germany, so in Germany we have a chancellor and it's her third term, and what we are seeing right now is the number of women in politics is dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping. So the interesting thing is that
So very quickly, why is that the case? Is it because generally they are more attacked, more open to sort of criticism? I mean, you see it on social media, or I don't know,
well,
what other factors are there at play?
The factors, research found that the factors are, well, conservatives would say, you see, women belong into the house, behind in the kitchen, and not into politics. They don't even want to, right?
Moved on everything.
Well, we have enough of that globally, unfortunately. Yeah. But what we know is, and that's the interesting case, that research shows that in civil society organizations, women are at equal level with men. So it seems that women have less of a liking for party politics, and I think what we see specifically also in the younger generation in South Africa is that party politics is less attractive to young people particularly, and it seems to women also to bring about change.
Yeah, there have been various calls for a female deputy president. Let's take a look at what ANC's head of presidency, Zizi Kodwa, said about that.
We don't think that must be linked to a position of a deputy president, because a position of a deputy president and a deputy president of the ANC, two separate positions. The fact that he's a deputy president of the ANC is not a guarantee or guarantor of a position of the deputy president of the Republic.
I mean, what did you think about that? I mean, will it resonate? Do you think it'll make a difference? And why do you think the party's positioning itself in that manner?
Well, I think my colleague has captured that very well. It's a tactical decision, right? I think the assumption, if we have a woman in a leading position, and in principle, I think we should have that, right? So there is nothing wrong about it. But we assume that if we have a woman in a leading position, then because she's a woman, she has experiences as a woman, she therefore then will empathize with others and enable women-friendly policies. But we know that this is not necessarily the case, right? So we've seen this in South Africa in the way how particular fractions within the ANC have positioned themselves. We see it globally. We see it currently in England. We have a prime minister who is doing politics which is clearly not of the interest of marginalized groupings in the country, and many women belong to the more vulnerable groups in a country, generally speaking. So I think the notion that a woman per se is going to kind of uplift the cause of women is to be questioned. However, if I have two candidates, they're both equally skilled and they're both equally have all the integrity they need for the office. What a woman can bring is that she will allow to serve in a symbolic way a man can't. So she can serve as a role model.
Glass ceiling kind of thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
possibly with a bit more empathy, but that's not necessarily the case. Going back to the two main contenders, I mean, so you're saying that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is possibly the one that he will go for. I mean, considering that she was supporting Zuma's faction at Nasrec, she's definitely got closer to the president-elect. But how will he merge the two sides together using her? And are South Africans ready for that?
Well, I think so. I think as far as South Africans are concerned, I think that everyone is quite exhausted by, the factional politics in the ANC, and they just want things to get going and get everyone to get on with it. And that should be the focus of this new government rather than the factional politics in the ANC. But when it comes to the gender question, you've seen that President Ramaphosa has been making the right noises. He has made an attempt to engage women's groups and to particularly to address the issue of gender violence. Whereas we have a women's ministry. And you've seen Batabile Dlamini, who is the chair of the ANC Women's League, as the head of that ministry, but we haven't seen anything tangible come from that ministry. So what ought to happen now?
Do you think that says a lot about the power of women in that sort of ministry there, the fact that they've had conflicted heads there that possibly haven't been serving them in their best interests?
Well, you see, I think it goes back to what I've just said. We don't necessarily just have to lobby for women being in position of power in order to serve women. Well, we could say we rather should have a feminist quota instead of a gender quota, right? And that could include then progressive and feminist men too, and that would exclude probably certain women from holding these kind of offices, right? I think the notion that a woman in and on itself is automatically empathetic with women is the right person to run a government or to run a ministry in the interest of all women is unfortunately a little bit of a fantasy. I mean, personally speaking, for instance, if I'm looking what Helen Zille is doing right now, she's been the premier, right? One could say, wow, there's a woman running. Can you associate? Is she representing you? Well, I would say no.
Have women benefited?
Exactly.
And just the fact that we're having this sort of conversation, what do you think it says about David Mabuza's future?
Well, I don't know what David Mabuza's future is because he said he won't be sworn in as an MP for now until he clears his name, which means that he could make himself available to be sworn in at a later stage. And I don't know if that happens, if he then would... You see, this announcement of his was made by President Ramaphosa, which means that there was a discussion between the two. They both have an understanding of what now happens. So there could be an agreement that he re-enters government at some stage, or if he sits out this term, we don't know what it means for him.
But the fact that you got people in the party saying that we are ready for women, I think is quite a statement. And if we do see a woman and we do see opposing camps, I mean, how will that pull play out? How strong is the deputy presidency?
The deputy presidency is very much a token position right now. It doesn't have any real powers. The powers are assigned by the president. It doesn't have much influence. So it's what you make of it and how you use that position. So if you're going to have a woman in that position, which is the second, which ostensibly should be the second most powerful position in government, it's how they use that. And when you look at Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma pre-Nasrec, she didn't really campaign on women's issues.
No.
She campaigned on ANC issues. And there's a massive difference between what's in the interest of the ANC and what's in the interest of society. And a society where women have the greatest needs. For example, if you look at the voter registration figures, women outnumbered men on the voters' roll. But when you look at the election messaging, the parties didn't really target women in the messaging. So, women's issues are very much about tokenism and ticking boxes.
And I think one of the problems, I mean, we are our own worst enemies, aren't we? I mean, you don't often see women supporting other women, and maybe that should change.
I looked it up after you called me today, and I figured in Germany the last time where women actually lobbied together against the policy suggestion was in 1997,
Wow.
where women came together across fractions in order to lobby for the criminalization of rape within marriage. So normally, party always beats gender. That's the unfortunate thing.
All right, long way to go, and obviously we're going to be looking forward with great excitement to the next developments for our future of our country. Ranjeni Monusamy and Professor Antje Schumann, thank you very much. Well, the Minister in the Presidency, Dlamini-Zuma, says she's ready to serve in the government. So, well, that's quite a statement from her, quite a political statement as well. But let's move on to the next story, which we're going to be having after the promo. An ATM for corrupt executives and hell for passengers. PRASA is in serious financial and operational crisis. We discuss what went wrong at the rail agency and what it'll take to fix it.